So obviously last week I missed an episode, wasn't feeling very well, so I apologize for that. So instead of talking about the last 2 weeks of games, I'm going to break it down into three separate sections, in which this week I'm calling this episode Hello and welcome to another episode of the Devil's Weeklies, bi-weekly, I don't know. Welcome to the Devil's Weekly Roundup. My name is Lippy, and I am a Devils fan, and I have watched the last 2 weeks of Devils games. So I wanted to break it down by basically what was good the past 2 weeks, what was bad the last 2 weeks, and what was ugly the last 2 weeks. So let's go into what is the good. So the two games that I would probably put into this good section were the Blackhawks game and the Penguins game, which, funny enough, were the Devils' only two wins over the last 2 weeks. They beat the Blackhawks 4-2, and they beat the Penguins 5-2. Obviously, the team play, especially during the Penguins game, was very good. Before the Penguins game, the Devils had gone on a 3-game losing streak where they were just not looking like they were clicking. You know, Jack was out. Nico was out. Eventually, Timo was out, I believe, as well. He would get injured in the Winnipeg game. And just, the team was not clicking. I know analytically, if you looked at it, the numbers were still looking very good. But when you looked at it in terms of an eye test or even just watching the team play, like, I was watching players run into each other. Like, there were definitely problems. But I will say, at least for the Blackhawks game, which they should have beat the Blackhawks. No disrespect to the Blackhawks, actually full disrespect to the Blackhawks. They're rebuilding. They have Connor Bedard, who looks very good. Honestly, the way I would describe Connor Bedard when I was watching him in this game was a first-year Jack Hughes. He is now a small fish in a very big pond after being the big fish in a small pond. And you could see what he was doing is going to be amazing in a couple of years. He makes plays that he should not be making, and it's resulting in nothing happening. Jack went through very similar growing pains during his first year. He was making plays that maybe his teammates weren't ready for, or maybe they didn't quite understand, but now, after Jack has matured and after his teammates have learned his game, he's now thriving, as we have seen. And, you know, I think Connor Bedard is going to go through a similar growth thing. I think he's obviously having a much better first year than Jack ever did. But I will say, it was very impressive to watch him watch. It was very impressive to watch Connor Bedard play. You know, I said in the previous episode, the Chicago Blackhawks game was going to have to be a next man up type of mentality. And wouldn't you know, it was. Dawson Mercer gets his first of the year. We get other goals from Curtis Lazar, Michael McLeod, and Max Willman, an AHL call-up that day. Like I said, it was a full team play. And then the Devils go through their little bit of losing streak, which we're going to talk about in the next section. And then they get to the Pittsburgh game, which quite honestly, I was very not excited for. But, you know, how the Washington Capitals exist to beat the New Jersey Devils, the New Jersey Devils exist to beat the Pittsburgh Penguins. Pretty sure they were 4-0 versus the Penguins last year, so they have won the last 5 games versus this team. And they were without Jack, Nico, and Timo for this game. But it was a complete team effort. And it was very solid goaltending play. The team defense was very good, and obviously they scored 5 goals. You love to see that. The Penguins game was a continuation of what we saw in the Chicago game, where it was the Navy bottom 6 contributing with goals from Lazar and from Bastian. But then, in the later half of the game, we saw kind of our top 6 take over. Alexander Holtz scored a goal, Jesper Bratt scored a goal, and Tyler Toffoli scored a goal. So overall, this was probably the most impressive win for the Devils of the year. They played a full team game with missing their big stars, and they were able to get a win versus a division rival. Now, let's talk about the bad. So the 3 games that I'm throwing here in the bad are going to be the Chicago loss, which was 6-3, the Washington Capitals loss, which was 4-2, and the Winnipeg Jets game, which was 6-3. These games all kind of had a similar story, where basically the game just got away from the Devils. The Devils showed periods of where they were very strong, they were controlling the puck, they were playing their game, they had the possessions, they were scoring, but then they would just lose it. When I talk about the Devils losing it, especially during the Avalanche, going into the third period, it was tied 3-3. The Devils were skating with the Avalanche, and then basically in the third, the Avalanche took over. I think during this game, I saw like Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, and Mikko Rantanen played like an insane amount of time, like over 22 minutes each. And it was proof that they had to use their top guys in order to get done, and the game just got away from the Devils. In terms of the Capitals game, it's just kind of the same story whenever we play the Washington Capitals. They just seem to understand our game. They know how to stop it, and they just know how to beat us. That is the only reason why they exist. Besides getting over the goal record, it is to beat the New Jersey Devils. And then the Winnipeg game was kind of a similar thing. You know, when we look at the Winnipeg game, it was 0-0 after the first, playing very well. It was 3-2 Winnipeg after the second, but then it ended up being 6-3. The game just got away from the Devils, and it's kind of, you know, you can say, oh, they're missing key players. Injuries happen. You have to learn how to play through injuries. The Devils seem to be struggling to play a fully complete game, and I don't know if maybe this is just teams have adjusted to their play style, they're going through injuries, or, you know, maybe they're just not in sync yet like they were last year, and maybe they're trying to work towards getting in sync more towards the middle and end of the year. These games early in the season, obviously losing a couple here and there is okay. You just have to be near the playoffs. You want to build towards the playoffs. And I feel like the Devils have been doing I feel like that's what they're doing. They're knowing that we're probably going to make the playoffs, so let's work towards getting ready for the playoffs. You know, but you can't go through these 3-game losing streaks every single month. You have to be winning over half of your games every month. And so far, when we look at the Devils here in November, they have won 3 and lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So they are under 500 for the month. And, you know, you can't have that. But overall, you know, these games were just bad. They were not good games. They were in them for a little bit, but then the other team took over and the Devils were out of the game. Just the third period just doesn't seem to be the Devils' friend right now. And speaking of the third period not being the Devils' fans, let's talk about the ugly. I always look forward to the Devils and Rangers games. I feel like this is a very good rivalry, especially over the playoff series last year. It seemed like it was good. It was a clean slate, but it felt like we were in for a good game, and we definitely got a very good game. The Devils and the Rangers were trading goals back and forth. It was 2-2 as we headed into the third, and then early in the third, Devils get the lead with Eric Holla, and it's looking like, all right, Devils are going to be able to squeak this out. Jack was back. Had a goal, was a little controversial, I guess, in terms of the interpretation of the situation. But when you read the rules, it absolutely was the right call. I'm not sure about the Michael McLeod overturn. He went from having a double minor to a major to not having a penalty. Looking at the hit, and speaking from the top of my head right now, it looked like he hit his chest first and then went up and hit his chin. He probably should have gotten some type of penalty. Was it a major? I don't know. We'll let the internet squabble about that. I do know a lot of people were very upset with Jacob Trouba, and I hate him. I don't like Jacob Trouba. I think his game is very, which is kind of ironic when you think about it, because Jacob Trouba plays a game that's very similar to Scott Stevens. But I will say, at least last night, those hits Jacob Trouba threw, 100% clean. It definitely maybe shows that the Devils might need to address certain areas. I don't know if they need muscle, but maybe a little bit more grit. But the thing is, when you add grit, you also want to make sure that grit has talent. You don't want to just add grit to add grit. You do obviously want to be strong. You do want to be physical, because especially when you do get in the playoffs, it does get a little bit more grinding, a little bit more lumber is being thrown around. But I'm not saying let's go out and get the biggest guy we can to counter something that might not happen every game. What I'm saying is, if we do want to go out and get someone who has a little bit more physicality to the game, but can still contribute in other areas, and maybe being a very good defensive player, throwing stuff in on the score sheet, that's basically what you want to do. You don't want to go get someone like Ryan Reeves. You want to go and maybe get someone like, in past, I don't know how he's doing this season, but Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson is a very good example. Very physical player, but he also contributes in terms of the score sheet. But yeah, so Devils were up 3-2. And then we get kind of a misplay on the faceoff, which allows Panarin to score a point-blank goal on Vitek. And then John Marino misses an assignment. Vitek gives up a juicy rebound, and the Rangers take the 4-3 lead. And then eventually get an empty net goal. It was a good game that basically ended ugly. And, you know, it sucks, obviously. You don't want to drop a game to a division rival, because when you do, it's not a 2-point swing, it's a 4-point swing, because your opponent gains 2 points on you and you lose 2 points on gain on your opponent. So as we enter into the Thanksgiving week, the New Jersey Devils currently sit 5th in the Metro with 17 points. If we take a look at the wild card, the Devils are 2 points out of the Philadelphia Flyers, who currently occupy the second one with 19 points. And the Devils have a game in hand on them. So we don't want to be standing watching too much, but that's just kind of putting things in perspective of where we are. As we take a look at this week's schedule coming up, the Devils have 3 games. They will have a game Wednesday night in Detroit when they take on the Detroit Red Wings. They will be obviously off for Thanksgiving, but then they have a back-to-back on Friday and Saturday where they face the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Buffalo Sabres. So if there was a week for the Devils to bounce back and get back on track of where they could be and rifle all 3 wins in a row, this would be it. They've beaten Detroit. They should beat Columbus. And Buffalo, they lost to, but I think with Buffalo's injuries, the Devils should be in a better position to maybe take 6 points next week. Be really strong, and then it would put the Devils basically back into the playoffs, which is exactly where we expect them to be. So, thank you so much for watching this week's episode of the Devils Weekly Roundup. If you want to, you can follow me on my social medias. And if you'd like to leave a comment about stuff you would like me to discuss in further episodes, leave it down there in the comment section below. My name is Lippy, and I will see you next time.